นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังกุณุตรังอุปัชฌายังนามัสสามิ In my previous talk, I briefly referred to Sherlock Holmes, and I'd like to mention him again this evening. There's a story, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, his sidekick, went on a camping tour. And in the middle of the night, Sherlock Holmes woke Dr. Watson up. He said, "Watson, what can you deduce about our present situation? What do you see? What can you deduce?" And so Dr. Watson said things like, "Well, from the position of the stars in the sky, I would say it was such and such a time of the night. From the particular configuration of the moon, it's so what moon of the day of the moon it is, and there's a wind coming up from the east," and so he was coming up with all these kind of deductions, looking up the sky, you know. And Sherlock Holmes was saying, "No, no, no. So what is it, Sherlock? What is the deduction? Somebody's stolen our tent." So why do I tell you this story other than to make you laugh? Well, the reason being that I'm going to give a more kind of traditional Dhamma talk this evening and go through the 7 qualities. Yes, the 7 Saprissa Dhammas. These are 7 qualities of a wise person. And they start off with 2 qualities which make a pair, and they are Atta and Dhamma, which can be explained in a number of ways, but I'm going to present them in terms of methods, techniques, and goals or results. So a wise person knows the techniques, knows the methods, and he knows the goals, and he knows the results. So he knows what he needs to do, or she needs to do, to get the results that he or she is aiming at, and he knows what causes and conditions have led up to the present situation, for instance. But to begin with, I want to talk about methods and techniques, because we are living in an age obsessed with technique, and whether it's in worldly pursuits or in Dhamma practice, we tend to believe that success will be achieved through accumulating all the necessary information, to having very precise and comprehensive explanations of technique. And when we encounter difficulties in our life, in our meditation practice, the natural assumption is that our technique is faulty, or there's some kind of secret or esoteric tweak which will be like the magic key that opens the door to liberation. So we conceive of spiritual life as being an application of techniques, and one in which there are magic keys and magic bullets and special esoteric pieces of knowledge which somebody has somewhere, which will make it all a lot easier than it is right now. Now, I don't agree with this way of looking at things particularly, and that was why I started off with this story, because Dr. Watson's techniques and deductive abilities were very well honed, but he was missing the most important point, being that only because there was no canvas between his eyes and the sky was he able to make all those deductions. So he was overlooking the supporting conditions for his deductions, or for the application of the intellectual techniques which he was skilled in. So in meditation practice, I think that we can overlook the creation of the necessary supportive conditions for their successful application. Now, what are these? Well, there are many. For one, to begin with, in every meditation session, it is important to have a clear understanding of the goal of meditation. And that means both in the short term, in that particular meditation session, and also in the long term, or the ultimate goal of Nibbana, what exactly that might mean. So this is why these two qualities, Atta and Dhamma, form a pair, because the Dhammas, the methods, the techniques are applied in light of the Atta, or of the results, and that result has to be borne in mind as a guide for the application of techniques. But it's not only the presence of an understanding of the goal of practice, but looking and exploring what exactly enables us or helps us to apply techniques, and what prevents us or hinders us from doing so. So number one, of course, is wanting to. Do you want to apply your meditation technique throughout the 30, 40 minutes or 60 minutes of the meditation? This is not such a silly question as it might seem. We say, well, if I didn't want to do it, I wouldn't be sitting here in the first place. But that's not necessarily the case. And this wise desire, or chanda, or Dhamma chanda, is absolutely necessary for the successful application of effort. There are two kinds of desire spoken of by the Buddha: unwholesome desires, which he called tanha, which are the outgrowth of ignorance, lack of true understanding or wrong understanding. And there is chanda, which is the kind of desire that arises from knowledge, true understanding. So this is a very important point to remember. The Buddha did not castigate all kinds of desire, but only those that arise from ignorance. So you see somebody suffering and in pain, and the desire arises to help them. That is most definitely not the kind of desire that the Buddha told us to abandon. On the contrary. So in meditation, we have to want to meditate more than we want to allow our minds to indulge in memory and imagination. And we have to be very honest with ourselves at the beginning of a meditation session whether or not our mind is ready and interested and enthusiastic about the application of our meditation technique. If it's not, if one part of our mind is, it's time to meditate, this is what I usually do now, is accompanied by a lingering desire just to think about the past, think about the future, ponder some particular problem, issue, or just to indulge in fantasies, then it won't be successful. Even though you've learnt by heart all the techniques, you've heard all the teachings, if you have a wonderful car, but you don't ever go and sit in it, and you don't turn the engine on and drive it, well, you have a car, but you might as well not have it at all. So, at the beginning of a meditation practice, be willing to spend a little time talking to yourself. And how do you talk? You talk to yourself in ways that are going to bring up this interest and enthusiasm for meditation. And you can experiment with various ways of doing that. Maybe reflecting on the virtues of the Buddha, or the teachings, or the Sangha, great meditators, people who you find uplifting, inspiring figures, that you think of them and your mind becomes filled of reverence and devotion. These are positive emotions can be brought into our mind through certain reflections. Or we might reflect on death and how short and uncertain our life is, and how fortunate we are to have this opportunity to practice. So there won't be one particular reflection which will work every time that you feel a little lazy or heedless or unmotivated. But this is one of the skills that the meditator develops. He looks on his or she looks on her mind just as the way a loving parent looks at a child, and knows that you can't be harsh with a child all the time, but every now and again you do have to be a little harsh. You can't be kind to the child all the time, but you are generally act in a kind way. The idea is that you're looking what is in the best interests of the child at any given moment. And that's the way you start to look at your mind. What's in the best interests of your mind? How do you need to think? How do you need to approach what you're doing to create these supporting conditions, particularly in the realm of motivation and the emotional states which will sustain a meditation practice throughout its whole duration, not just starting off and sort of quite enthusiastic, and then the mind starts to wander a little bit and then just gets bored or gives up. That is exactly what we're practicing meditation to overcome in the first place. So we're learning life skills through meditation. It's not that we're trying to escape from certain negative mental states by finding some way into a peaceful, secluded mental state as a kind of temporary refuge. But we're learning the quality, how to develop the qualities of mind that will allow us to deal constructively and wisely with all mental states that may arise. We're talking about this just now. sometimes lay meditators in Thailand will say to me, I know I should meditate, but so sometimes I'm just so agitated and so upset, I just can't meditate. And I say to them, this is like somebody with a serious illness saying, I'm just too sick to go and see the doctor. You go to see the doctor when you're sick. And when you most need to meditate, is precisely when you don't want to. Because that's when you're developing the ability to bear with, to be patient with, and to learn the nature of negative emotions. When else are you going to be able to learn and to let go of these things if you're not doing it in your meditation period? So techniques are important, but we have to ask ourselves, am I in the right space? Am I sufficiently motivated, sufficiently well directed to apply these techniques well and successfully? If I'm not, what would be a good reflection to use to bring my mind to that state? Now, I found that an adaptation of the Mr. Goenka's sweeping method to be a very good introduction to a meditation session, and one that we can adapt to our needs. So for those of you not familiar with that, it's a kind of a warm-up exercise for mindfulness, just to get into the mood, as it were. So what you do is you bring your attention to the sensations on the top of your head and what's there, not speculating about it or worrying about it, but just being present to whatever sensation appears there. And then looking and being aware of whatever sensation is in the face, then in the neck, in the shoulders, the arms, the hands, the fingers, the chest, the belly, the back, the buttocks, the legs, the knees, the calves, the ankles, toes, feet and toes. So your body gives you a set, clear-cut progression, something for your mindfulness to follow, step by step, point to point, from head to toe. Now, you can use that, we're talking techniques here, you can use that as simply a mindfulness exercise to bring awareness to all the parts of the body which you may well not be directly aware of. And it's incredible the extent to which in such a sensual and body-based culture, how little direct awareness we often have of what's going on in our body. Another, if you have a lot of pain or you're feeling very low, one way is to spread thoughts of loving kindness to each part of the body, and developing this very positive attitude and stance towards your physical body. So if you have difficulty in spreading thoughts of loving kindness to yourself as the person you think you are, then you start off very easily just sending loving kindness to your shoulder or your arms or your hands, and so the guiding principle in a lot of these meditations is always start from the easy or the easiest and move towards the more difficult. If you're in a slightly different state of mind, an alternative is to develop this mindfulness step by step through the physical body, and to allow your mind to think, but think about all the illnesses that could arise in each part of the body. Think of all the things that can go wrong with your eyes, all the things that can go wrong with your nose, all the things that can go wrong with your brain, all the things that can go wrong with your teeth. So you're giving your mind a certain license to think here, but it's constrained within boundaries that you've clearly established, and it is focused and directed, and it's this kind of reflection is good if you're in a very kind of sensual, exuberant, outgoing, heedless kind of mind state when you sit down, rather than just sort of struggling and fighting against it and getting very frustrated. You recognize, there's this kind of energy. What's the skillful way of dealing with that? And so that reflection on all the illnesses and problems that the human body is heir to can just deflate that kind of heedless, exuberant energy. So it's always finding the right tool or the right medicine for the present imbalance or problem. Just one more thought or one more reflection on the point of technique and method, and that is that when we have a lot of agitation in the mind, a lot of negative emotion, then how do we deal with it? Now, when we have defilements and clouded emotions in our mind, whatever kind, it's quite obvious to almost everyone that if we welcome those thoughts and become obsessed by them, that our mind will never be peaceful. That I think is not the difficult point at all for anyone to grasp. But the trap that many people fall into is feeling that wanting to get rid of something provides the necessary motivation to do so. But in the practice of meditation, we soon realize that not wanting to have a particular mental state arising in the present moment and trying to get rid of it provides the very same function of fueling the flames of that mental fire every bit as powerfully as liking and indulging in the pleasure of those thoughts and memories and so on. So the wise way is merely to recognize and neither to grasp onto or push away, and merely recognize the existence. And in most cases, that mere recognition of a thought as a thought, of anxiety as anxiety, of doubt as doubt, of anger as anger, of depression as depression, the mere recognition of something as just what it is enough for that mental state to pass away. Just as we shine a light in the darkness, and anyone who's misbehaving just sort of like this, like they were actually meditating or doing something serious. And so you're shining a light in the darkness. In the case that moment of mindfulness is not sufficient, then you may need to apply particular antidotes. But the first wise response must always be that of equanimity. That's not the end of story in every case, but it's definitely indispensable. Now, one way of dealing with agitation in which you avoid that pitfall of aversion, which sometimes can be quite subtle, is to, if it's let's say in the case of a verbal thought, mental activity is sometimes images, sometimes words, and sometimes a mixture of the two. Let's take the case of words in your mind. And so just this thought comes into your mind is, I wonder what time he's going to finish this talk, and so you catch yourself, you see. And when you catch yourself, it says, don't think like that. That's not a good thing to think. That's not very respectful, you see, and then you're just making it worse. But when you recognize a thought in the mind, consciously continue the thought. Consciously continue the sentence that you're thinking, but in slow motion, just very slow. So you're thinking, I wonder what time, when you realize, and then you think that he will finish this talk. You see, you think like this consciously. So you're not saying, get out of my mind, I don't want to think like this, it's not very good. I'm supposed to be meditating or whatever. But you recognize it and you allow it and you think, but in this very artificial, slow motion kind of way. And before very long, incredibly quickly, you just get bored. This is a very good meditation for people in the present day whose boredom threshold is extremely low. So rather than being the enemy, you can make use of this easily bored personality that you have to get bored with what you're thinking about. So you allow yourself to think, and then you can just follow it and be totally mindful and present to the thought, but making it slow motion. A visual analogy or a visual alternative here is, as you're thinking thoughts which are words in your mind, then you visualize them as words written with a stick in water. Again, because you know and you have this memory of what happens when you write in water, it takes over. It's not something you're doing. The thoughts just dissolve in the water automatically. So you're taking away this idea of me trying to stop myself thinking. So this is realm of technique. And I'm probably not going to get through all these 7 qualities because I've hardly started, and we could go all night, but I'll try and speed up now. A point about atta or goal. If, I give you another image or analogy, you're swimming across a lake and your goal is a tree on the other shore. So those of you who are swimmers, try to imagine how you would swim towards that tree. Now if you're looking up like this, trying to see where the tree is all the time, you're not going to swim very well, and it's going to take you forever to get there, and it's going to feel even longer than forever, subjectively, because, of course, it's just not getting any closer. So what does the wise swimmer do? The wise swimmer puts his effort into swimming, and every now and again he just bobs his head up and just to check whether he's still in line with the tree. And this is how you meditate. You have a goal, you have something that you're aiming towards, but you don't keep your mind on it all the time. But every now and again you just check whether or not what you're doing right now is calibrated with that the process which is going to lead you to your goal, and whether you're going in the right direction or not. Okay, so that's At and Tham. What's the next one? Don. You need to know yourself. And so what does that mean? Self should be the refuge of self. People read this and think, I thought Buddhism was all about anatta and not self. What's all this stuff about self? And so these are two different levels. The conventional level means being realistic, not being too idealistic, and refraining from the word should and should not whenever possible. These are poisonous words. I should be, I should not be, he should be, she should be, it should not be. These are words arising from habit and mental laziness. So be mindful and try to find alternative ways of looking at your experience without using those words. So a lot of religious traditions and philosophies depend on these a lot. They say, you should be like this. A good person is like that, you see. And then you read this and it's very inspiring, but then you realize you're not the kind of person that you're supposed to be. And what is the end result of a teaching telling you how you should be and your recognized inability to be that kind of person? And the answer is guilt. So we have guilt-ridden societies where people are so upset that they can't be the kind of people that they think they should be. So we don't need to follow that path at all. So we recognize, try to look, well, how are we right now? Even meditators can get this. I've been meditating for X number of weeks, months, years. Therefore, I should be more wise, more peaceful, more this, more that than I am. And so the best, very simple mantra to use with this is, why not? Why shouldn't you be? Why, you say, I should be, why should you be? On what ground should you be, given all the causes and conditions that have led up to this particular situation? So don't follow that one. I have my favorite story of someone who knows himself is, of course, Ajahn Chah. Story being one you may well be familiar with. As a young monk, he was on Tudong, travelling through the countryside, walking. He stayed at a small monastery, and every day this young widow used to come to offer food. And, of course, young widows can't come very close to young monks very easily. So this young widow, very intelligent, she had a very young son. And so she would have a young son who was very sweet and charming, as young boys and girls can be, to go and offer things, and so created this kind of relationship. And then one night, in the middle of the night, Ajahn Chah woke up his lay attendant and he said, "Get your stuff together, we're leaving." And Ajahn Chah ran away. He ran away because he recognized he wasn't confident that he had the strength to withstand the temptations that he was feeling at that particular moment. So he swallowed his pride. He said, I'm just not sure I can handle this very well. So we have this teaching of bearing with things and never giving up and so on, but it has to be balanced with wisdom by this recognition of our own limitations. Not saying we should be this way. If we're not, then we recognize that and very humbly make the necessary adjustments, and that might mean a tactical withdrawal, or it might mean some people looking at us somewhat askance, but never mind. There is a recognition of what we, right now, what we can and can't do. We're not saying we are this way and will be this way always, but right now, this is how things are right now. Now, I think just one more point on this virtue, and that is that there's a natural tendency for us to give exaggerated time to those things that we're good at, and to neglect those things that we're bad at. And that's fair enough. We do need that sense of self-respect, self-esteem that comes from accomplishment, even in quite mundane matters. But at the same time, we have to be very careful to know ourselves and know when we're being dishonest with ourselves, or whether we're just we're avoiding discomfort or an unwillingness to learn and to be with certain things, and turning more and more to what's pleasant and the things that we're good at. And I've practiced yoga since I was a teenager, and I know because there are so many yoga exercises that you can do, and there's not a fixed sequence. Now, I've noticed in certain periods of my life that I tend to do the ones that I can do well, and the ones that I can't do well, I don't do so much. And that's just one small example that I'm sure we all have. Oh, I'm not that kind of person. I can't do this very well. One of my friends and mentors of very early years in Thailand, first monk I met at Wat Pah Pong, the first Western monk I met, and I considered him the most humble, self-effacing human being I'd ever met, and someone who was quite willing to say, no, I can't do this, or no, I'm no good at this. And I found this quite inspiring, until at a certain point I realized that he would only, in his life, he would only ever do things that he was confident he could do well. He just couldn't handle the humiliation of being a failure or a loser. He couldn't face possible criticism from others for doing a bad job. So his life became rather constricted, that he would only be willing to put in effort into things that he could do well. So in this case, I would say that he didn't really know himself well enough, and so recognizing on the mundane level your strengths and weaknesses, and not taking them as indicators of who you really are, but these are just the results of accumulated habit, perhaps of only this lifetime, but it could be of many lifetimes. But in the end, all we can see is just habit. It's just habit energy, and you can change habits. But if your mind is into a deep rut, you can't expect to change a habit overnight. It will take some time, but it can be done. Next one is knowing the right amount. And this means knowing the right amount in food, knowing the right amount of exercise, knowing the right amount of time that you spend in different activities, how much time you spend on Facebook, how much time you spend on your computer, how much time you spend watching the television, how much time you spend meditating, and if you spend a lot of time on the computer and a lot of time on the TV, you may well find you don't have very much time to meditate at all. What's the right amount in everything? This is podi, the middle way. A lot of misunderstanding about the middle way, and whenever anyone wants to justify their own position, they'll tend to take two things on either side of them and try and tell you that it's the middle way. So you have to be very careful of that when other people tell you they're on the middle way, or when you tell yourself or others that you're on the middle way. So for instance, if you have someone who's never even hit somebody in their life, never been violent, and you have another person who's a serial killer, like what's the middle way? Well, you say, well, I'll only kill someone if I'm really, really angry. So that's like an obvious example of a false middle way. The middle way, just as I was speaking about ends and means, techniques and goals and so on, the middle way can only be understood when you have a goal. My favorite example of this is if somebody says, I want to go to Alaska. If I drive towards Portland, would I be going in the right direction? And you could say, yes. Okay, no question, immediately. If you're going in a northerly direction, you've got a good chance you'll get more or less up there sooner or later. But let's say in the second case you say, I just like to go for a nice drive. If I turn left and go north towards Portland, would that be the right direction? So now you can't give the same emphatic, unequivocal answer because you don't have a goal in mind. You say, I just like to go for a nice drive. Well, you could go north and have a nice drive, you could go east, you could go whatever direction. So the answer to the question, is this right or is this wrong, is this appropriate or is this not, can only be answered really when you have a goal. So the goal of in Buddhism is the complete eradication of dukkha and its cause, and the perfection of wisdom and compassion. So therefore, the middle way in practice in whatever area is the optimum practice, whether it's in the level of conduct, of samadhi, of wisdom, whatever we're doing, it's the optimum amount which will lead towards the goal in which we are that we are pursuing or following. So it's not just halfway between this extreme and that extreme. And so middle way can change a lot over the course of a person's day or year. Something that at one particular period in your life might seem to be too strict or too tough. Another period of life might be just the optimum, might be just the middle way for you at that time. So you have this sense of what keeps you on the middle way towards the goal in which that you are aiming for. So having a sense of what's enough, what's the right amount. And on the worldly level, of course, very important in this world which is constantly telling you what more is better. And something to observe is that there's so much choice in the world these days, 10 different kinds of bagel and whatever. Now, if you have 10 choices, you can only have one. So if you accumulate all the good points of the 9 that you've rejected, they're probably going to exceed the good points of the one you've chosen. So this is why, you constantly feel you're missing out, because every time you make a choice, you've rejected so many interesting and delicious things. So be aware of that. You say, this is good enough. This... And that not making that comparison, not adding up all the positive qualities of things that you haven't had. But if there's one teaching from the my own childhood and somewhat patchy Christian upbringing, which I still make use of. Count your blessings. Absolutely essential. Count your blessings. And enjoy what you're with or the one you're with. That's Brahman, Don Brahman. Gan. The next one is time and place, knowing time and place. Ripeness is all, said Shakespeare. And that sense of when is the right time and place to do things. Now that you need a certain amount of patience and mindfulness there, because if you're someone who just reacts blindly to situations and people's actions and words, then your sense of time and place is not going to be very developed. Recently, the Catholic Church did a long-term survey. I'm not sure whether it's only amongst members of the church or generally, as to what personality types were most likely to get Alzheimer's. And the answer is people who have no ability to delay gratification or no patience, basically. So if you're someone who thinks of something and just has to say it straight away, has to do it straight away, then you might lead a rather exciting life, but Alzheimer's is a depressing possibility in the future. The wise person says it's not worth it. So learning that sense of composure and not just being a puppet, and somebody says something and you react, or does something and you react, and without any kind of inner integrity, but developing that composure. And then when there's mindfulness and there's a patience, then a sense of time and place. If you're feeling really agitated and upset, then it's usually not the time to speak. If somebody insults you or misrepresents you, what do you do? Well, it depends, doesn't it? Sometimes it might just be a matter of being very patient and allowing the situation to unfold and for time to be the test. On other occasions, it might be necessary to inform certain people of the true facts of the case. In so many situations,